Good afternoon, my friends. Welcome to The Law and Life. I'm your lawyer, Patrick McGeehan, and I am your best friend at your worst time. Today, we're going to talk about how life can change drastically in 20 minutes. I was sent the case last night by a viewer, John, of a police shooting out of Titusville, Florida. Titusville is in the Cocoa Beach area. It's just south of Daytona, west of Orlando on the coast. It involves a Titusville police officer, a Joshua Payne, white male, 29 years old. He lives in Winter Park. He was arrested in this case for manslaughter. It occurred back in December 26, 2021. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement investigated the case, which is the trend now. Florida Department of Law Enforcement investigates most shootings in the state of Florida. No longer are police departments investigating their own shootings. Anyway, Titusville Police Department has about 90 officers, so it's not a small department. It's a rather large department by those standards. Joshua Payne, the officer, they just recently released this investigation in the last couple weeks. When they released the investigation, the state attorney charged Officer Joshua Payne with manslaughter. He was arrested, placed on leave without pay, and he immediately resigned from his position. Anyway, the story of the case is that one James Lowry, black male, 40 years old, was involved in a domestic dispute with his girlfriend where he beat her up. They got a few calls on it. They went out. Officer Payne confronted Mr. Lowry. Mr. Lowry took off running. He was dropping some fentanyl out of his pockets, a little bit of oxy. He was found to have 43 grams of fentanyl, 24 grams of oxy, and that's a lot. That's serious prison time right there for that possession amount. Anyway, he was dumping it out of his pocket while he was running. He got into a little scuffle with the officer. Once he saw that Mr. Lowry was going into his pockets, the officer pulled his weapon along with his taser. He used his taser a couple times and it didn't work. The officer pulled his weapon, and Mr. Lowry grabbed at the weapon and the taser. A brief struggle ensued. The officer pulled away from him, got back a little bit, continued to use his taser, had his weapon drawn also. Mr. Lowry jumped over a fence, and the officer discharged his weapon one time, striking Mr. Lowry in the back of the head. So let's get into the video and take a look at it.
215 to 227. If you haven't found that gentleman, we hear some screaming from maybe 909. If you can head down this way.
All right, we have the initial encounter with Mr. Lowry. He matches the description that they put out on the bolo: black male, black jacket. They stopped two other people who provided identification and were released. And then the third person that was stopped by Officer Payne, and that was Mr. Lowry, the subject. He was identified prior to this encounter by name. So here you can see him calling out to him. Let's get in there. The audio kicks in.
I got a guy over here on...
And you can see Mr. Lowry is not interested in stopping and talking to Officer Payne here, and the chase is on. He chases him for a good ways. He chases him around the corner over to the next block to a house, and this area is a residential area, single family houses on about quarter-acre lots. So he chases them all the way around the block, past some cars, over into a driveway where he runs into a fence. Pretty good chase. I'd probably pass out running that far. Anyway, you can hear him letting loose with the taser. The officer deploys the taser several times. I don't know how many cartridges these officers are carrying, but at some point you got to realize the taser is not working. And here you can see the comments on the video. He's reaching into his pockets, tossing items. That's where they believe he was tossing the dope. The officer's yelling at him, giving him commands, and as usual, the commands are not being followed. It progresses along to where they get to the gate. There's the stuff dumping out of his pockets. This is where, let me go back a little bit. This is where they see him dumping the stuff out of his pockets. This is where he's dumping the drugs. The officer draws his weapon. Now he has his weapon in one hand and his taser in the other hand. All right, here's where he grabs for him. Mr. Lowry grabs both the taser and the weapon. And a little bit of struggle ensues. The officer is able to pull back.
Away! Get down! Get down!
Pulls back. He's still not following the commands.
Get down! Hey, he's
You don't hear Lowry say much, but the officer says much. There's where he goes over the fence and the gunshot goes off. And there's a follow-up aftermath after the gunshot, and that's pretty much it for the action part. The backup units are coming in, they're securing the area, and they're trying to render the first aid. And the video starts over again. Anyway, let's talk about this case a little bit. When the officer's pursuing, the subject is identified. They know who he is. But he's a young officer. He's been on the police department since July 6th of 2020, so he's got about a year and a half on. Officer Payne's 29 years old. He's a young guy. He's caught up in the thrill of the chase, and I understand that completely. I've been there. I know how it is. Bad guys run from you. You want to chase them. I used to be of the opinion that if somebody runs, you chase them and you get them. You take them into custody. That's your job. You're a cop. That's what you were hired for. My thinking on that's evolved a little bit. Number one, because I'm a lot older now and I don't know. I certainly couldn't chase a guy that far. I don't know. I'd probably pass out en route and they'd be sending fire rescue out for me. Anyway, you have several options here. You can pursue him, which is, always dangerous. He's a known subject. You can let him go and get him with a warrant later. Somebody will pick him up. Or you can set up a perimeter and call in the dog and the helicopter. I don't know if Titusville has dogs, but I know Brevard County, the sheriff's office there has dogs, and I know Cocoa has dogs. And Brevard does have a helicopter. I don't know if it was up at this particular time of day, but that is always an option. Those are your options when the guy starts to flee. When they get to the gate and the struggle ensues, it's always dangerous when you're chasing a subject by yourself because it's always an armed encounter. The officer always has a gun. There's always a gun involved, and it's an armed encounter. And like you see in this video, the subject grabbed at the officer's gun or grabbed the officer's gun, and had he gotten the gun away from the officer, the outcome of this case might have been very, very different. But once they get to the gate, you have options. Again, you can go after a warrant for the guy, pick him up later, sit on his house, wait until he's not expecting it, and get him by surprise. You could jump the fence behind him and continue to pursue him. You could stop pursuing him, set up a perimeter, call in the dogs and the helicopter. Or just set up the perimeter and search on foot. Those are the options. Plugging a guy in the back of the head is not an option. But we've seen similar cases like this in the last couple of years. There was one, in Minnesota where a female officer pulled her gun in her taser and fired her gun instead of her taser. Anyway, it seems to be, at least in my opinion, that maybe there's too much reliance on the taser. I mean, the guy gets tasered in this case a couple times or more, and the taser's not having an effect. At some point, you have to realize that the taser's not working and go to either go hand to hand or set up a perimeter or select one of your other options other than plugging the guy. It's obviously a case where this level of force was not justified, hence the manslaughter charge against the officer. It shows you just how quickly things can go to crap when you're in this situation. And if you're a single officer and you're chasing a single subject and you get into the physical confrontation with them like they had here, they get rolling around on the ground and get into a fight right there. That's always another dangerous situation, and you can easily get killed or injured or maimed or something like that. In this particular case, I think there's a lack of training. There's definitely a training issue involved. I don't think any police officer has taken training courses where they pull out both their taser and their weapon at the same time. That's usually a bad mix, and I think we're going to see more of this. I think in this atmosphere and the current situation between police and community relations in a lot of neighborhoods, not all of them, and some of them, you're gonna see more incidents like this. I think the taser training as it is now is wholly insufficient, as well as the non-lethal and the combination lethal and non-lethal training involved. A lot of videos you see from like the LAPD and the larger agencies, you'll have officers specifically non-lethal, and you'll have officers that are lethal. But when you're by yourself, you're both lethal and non-lethal. But you have to recognize when the non-lethal is not working, and then what level of force on the force of continuum can you go to. In this particular case, you cannot go to deadly force. This is just a terrible case. This officer's been charged. You know, he resigned from his job even though he was relieved of duty. He went ahead and resigned. The family has hired Benjamin Crump. Let's talk about that a minute. Benjamin Crump, certainly you know who he is. He's a very well-known civil rights lawyer. He gets hired in a lot of these cases. And he has a very unique tactic in these particular cases. He goes into the area and he forms public opinion because he knows that the government and the police department won't comment about pending investigations, and they release very little information to the public before these investigations is continued. So Mr. Crump can go in and he can form public opinion before the other side gets out, and that's always an advantage, and that's why he gets very large settlements in a lot of these police shooting cases. Anyway, if you have a police shooting case you'd like me to look at, please send it to me. Usually I'm very well aware of what's going on in Florida as far as police shootings, but this one slipped under my radar. I wasn't aware of it until John sent it to me, but I'm always happy to review those types of cases. Any type of use of force case, I'll give you my analysis as a lawyer and as a former 20-year police officer in Miami-Dade County, and where I've been to, you know, a whole host of police shootings. I've seen all kinds of stuff down there. I'll give you my opinion on it, my analysis of it. Of course, none of that matters. My opinion doesn't matter in the end. Your opinion doesn't matter in the end. The only opinions that matter are that of the judge and jury. So everything else is just speculation. And of course, you know, if you can support your opinion, of course, is valid. And there may be other opinions. You have a different opinion on this particular case, please let me know down in the comments below. I'd love to read them. Until next time, welcome again to The Life and Law. I'm your lawyer, Patrick McGeehan, and I am your best friend at your worst time.